class today. Here is my cat file that you will find in our weekly discussion. So let's talk about the different types of smart objects. There are smart objects that are raster files. For example, the cat. I'm going to make this a little bigger so you can see it. So this cat was brought in, and it's a smart object. It was created as a smart object when I dragged it in from the Finder. And what's nice about that is that if I try and cut the cat, so I have my selection and I hit delete, I can't do it. I can't hurt this paint layer, even if I try. So the only thing I can do to it is to create this layer mask, which is what I want to do. Remember, we work constructively and not destructively. So that's one type of smart object, a raster-based layer, an image, a photograph. The other kind of smart object is a vector-based smart object. I'm going to pop over to Adobe Illustrator. Here's a mandala that I've actually included in the file. I'm going to grab it. I am going to copy it. I'll close this Illustrator file. I'm back in Photoshop now, and I'm going to paste. And when I paste, it says, hey, there's something in the clipboard. How would you like it to be brought in? I'm going to say smart object. Now, here is my mandala. I can scale it. I can put it behind the cat to create a kind of halo. I can work with the transformational tools here, some of them anyway. And I can also, if I decided I wanted to edit the mandala, you'll notice it's marked Vector Smart Object. Photoshop still sees it as an Illustrator file. So if I double click, notice I'm back in Adobe Illustrator. And while I'm in Illustrator, I can change the color. I can do all of the fun Illustrator things that we learned last semester. And when I hit OK, notice it doesn't say mandala anymore. This is the Vector Smart Object that has been placed inside Photoshop. When I do that, it says, do you want to save the change? And I say, yeah, I want to save the change. And there it is. All right? Now, just to show you, if I wanted two of these mandalas, and so I take this one and I duplicate it, and I want one to be pink and one to be blue. If I double click, and I go in and I change the color from pink to blue, just on this one mandala, and I say, save the change, they both change color. To Photoshop, these are the same object, even though there are two of them. Let me undo. If I want to have one of one color and one of another color, I need to come to Layer, Smart Objects, New Smart Object via Copy. Then I can take that new smart object back in Adobe Illustrator. I can change my color, change it however I like, save the change, and now they're behaving like two separate objects. So, first type of smart object is a raster-based smart object. Second type is a vector-based smart object. You can import things from Adobe Illustrator. If you want to do a hand-drawn element, scan it and use the Adobe Illustrator auto tracing tools to auto trace it. And then you can bring it in. You can colorize it. You can use some of these different style menus. So for example, if I wanted to do a drop shadow, I could come in here and add a drop shadow. If I wanted to create something special using a filter, I could come up to the filter gallery. And because this is a smart object, I can use the smart filter. So I could, let's see, I could texturize it. I could add a texture to it, right? Now, the beauty of using a smart object when I'm working with filters or when I'm working with those special effects is that the filter is right here. I can switch it on or off. I can go in and edit it. Again, working constructively. So those are the first two types of smart objects, vector and raster. The third type of smart object that I can do is one that I do for myself. Let's see, I'm going to make another couple of statues of Bast here for the background. I use smart objects as an organizational tool. So if I have all of these statues in my file, that's taking up a fair amount of real estate here in the layers menu. And as I mentioned to you, the second project that we do is going to be a storyboard. We're going to have 6 of these images, 6 artboards in the storyboard. So I'm going to grab this and this. I've got my finger on the shift key. So I'm grabbing multiple versions. And I'm going to come up here. This is how you make a smart object. Smart object, convert to smart object. Et voila. I have one smart object. And if I decide I want to edit that smart object, say I want more statues of Bast, I double click and I can do anything that I can do inside a regular Photoshop file, I can do inside this smart object. I'm layering objects inside the smart object. And if I close that, and I always save my changes, now I can apply filters because it's a smart object. I can apply filters. I can do a color overlay. Let's see, I'll turn it pink. I can add a filter. I'll do a Gaussian blur. These are all things that I showed you in class. So if I wanted this to look like it was in the background, I could do a Gaussian blur. Try to get into the habit, if you're using filters, of using smart objects. If you decide, for whatever reason, that you don't want something to be a smart object, here, I'm going to turn everything off. This is not a smart object. This was my base layer that I started with. So to turn it into a smart object, I can come up here and say convert it to a smart object. And then I can, just the way I did in class, if I drag this box and I come up to filter and I do Gaussian blur. Now the Gaussian blur is only going to occur within my selection box. So let's see. I can do the slider. And then there's my smart filter. But if I decide, for whatever reason, I'm going to throw that smart filter away, that I prefer this not to be a smart object, maybe I absolutely have to cut into it for whatever reason, I can go to layer and I can simply say rasterize the smart object. And now it's a paint layer again. If I forget to make it into a smart object and I go to filter, you will notice that there is an option here to convert for smart filters. Smart objects use smart filters. Photoshop is so convinced that you should use smart objects to create your filters that it gives you this extra little reminder that you can grab them here. All right, that's a very down and dirty recap of what I showed you in class.